They call it a gift, don't they? That ability to feel deeply, to hold space, to sense another's unspoken pain as if it were your own. To be a super empath is to move through the world with your chest wide open, with an almost spiritual radar for suffering, longing, and need. And in a way, it is a gift. It's what makes you magnetic. It's what draws people to you. But it's also the very thing that can leave you bleeding in the arms of someone who never intended to hold you in the first place. Have you noticed that? That pattern of being the one who sees the best in someone else, who believes in their hidden potential, who says, "I'll love you so fully that maybe you'll remember how to love too." And yet, when the person standing across from you is an avoidant, that gift becomes the perfect trap. Because your empathy doesn't inspire them to rise. It gives them cover to retreat. Your capacity to love unconditionally isn't met with devotion, it's met with distance. The avoidant doesn't look at your empathy and say, "What a safe place for me to land." They look at it and feel the walls close in. Your intensity of care feels like demand. Your unwavering patience feels like pressure, and your boundless acceptance feels like a mirror they can't bear to look into. And so the more you give, the more they vanish. The more you try to heal, the more they feel broken. The more you open, the more they close. It doesn't make sense at first. Because to a super empath, love is oxygen. When you feel someone slipping, you breathe harder, give more, lean in closer. But to the avoidant, closeness is suffocation. Your oxygen is their poison. And that is why this dynamic almost always collapses. Not because you're too much, not because they're evil, but because you are speaking two different emotional languages that can't translate under pressure. The failure isn't in your empathy, it's in where you've been pouring it, and until you see that clearly, you will keep mistaking your heart's superpower for a curse. Here's the first truth you need to see. Avoidants don't fall in love with you, they fall in love with your availability. They fall in love with the way you make intimacy effortless, how you carry both sides of the connection, how you remove the burden of vulnerability by offering all of yours up front. It's intoxicating at first, because to them you feel like home without asking for rent. But that same availability eventually becomes unbearable. Think about it. An avoidant has spent their whole life managing closeness like a dangerous substance. Too much, and they feel they'll lose themselves. Too little, and they're afraid of being abandoned. They live in this constant push-pull between craving and fleeing. Then you arrive with your unshakable capacity to love, to soothe, to forgive. You rush in like water into their desert. At first, they drink deeply. They can't believe the oasis they found, but soon it's too much. It overwhelms their system. And what once felt like nourishment begins to feel like drowning. And here's the cruel contradiction. The more you sense them pulling away, the more your empathy kicks in. You think, if I can just show them I won't hurt them, if I can just love them harder, they'll finally feel safe. But have you noticed that the harder you try, the colder they become? It's not because they don't feel something for you. It's because your efforts illuminate the very vulnerability they've spent their lives running from. Your healing feels like invasion. Your closeness feels like exposure. This is why the relationship always collapses, not in one dramatic moment, but in a slow erosion. You find yourself exhausted, trying to keep alive a love that only breathes when you're the one doing CPR. And in the quiet, lonely nights, you start to believe the lie that you're too much, that your capacity for love is somehow the problem. But listen to me closely. You are not too much. You are simply misapplied. Super empaths fail with avoidance, not because their empathy is broken, but because they're trying to build a bridge to someone who keeps burning it from the other side. You cannot outlove avoidance. You cannot soothe someone out of their fear of intimacy by drowning them in proof that you're safe. In fact, the very act of proving creates the opposite effect. It makes them feel controlled, watched, pressured to perform a kind of love they don't know how to sustain. So the first shift is this. Stop mistaking your ability to carry the relationship as evidence that you should. Stop seeing your tolerance for pain as a reason to stay. Empathy doesn't mean you were meant to be someone's emotional crutch. It means you were built to connect, to feel, to heal, but only with someone who values that gift instead of running from it. And that realization that your empathy is not a flaw but a treasure in the wrong hands is the first crack in the illusion that keeps you bound to avoidance. It's the moment you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "Why am I giving gold to someone who only knows how to bury it?" The second truth cuts even deeper. Super empaths aren't just unlucky in finding avoidance. They're drawn to them. And not because they want to suffer, but because avoidance activates something familiar in their nervous system. They stir up an old hunger, a childhood echo, and it feels like love. Think about it. If you grew up in an environment where love was inconsistent, where affection had to be earned, where safety was conditional, where approval came and went like the weather, you learned to stretch yourself into whatever shape was needed to be chosen. You became hyper-attuned, always scanning for shifts, always managing other people's moods as though your survival depended on it. That's not empathy, that's adaptation. And when you carry that into adulthood, it doesn't feel strange. It feels like home. So when an avoidant comes into your life, their distance, their hot and cold energy, their unpredictability doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like a puzzle you've been solving your whole life. Their silence isn't a wall, it's an invitation for you to try harder. Their withdrawal isn't a dismissal, it's your chance to prove your worth. You see their avoidance not as a warning sign, but as an opportunity. If I can love them enough to stay, maybe this time I'll finally win. And here's the cruelest part. Your empathy convinces you that you're choosing them, but really it's your old wound choosing for you. That ache inside that still whispers, if I can get love from someone who struggles to give it, it must mean I'm truly worthy. Avoidants with their emotional distance become the perfect testing ground for that old hope. And so you circle the drain, thinking this is a soulmate pull, when really it's a trauma echo. But here's where the shift happens. Once you recognize that your attraction to avoidance isn't a mystery but a pattern, you reclaim your power, you stop romanticizing the intensity and start questioning it. Because yes, it's intoxicating. The chase, the longing, the high when they finally let you in for a moment. But if you're honest, that high is always followed by collapse, and deep down, you know it. Super empaths fail with avoidance because they confuse activation with connection. They confuse familiarity with love. But real love isn't supposed to feel like constant self-abandonment. Real intimacy isn't supposed to feel like a test you can never pass. When you begin to see that, the spell starts to break. So ask yourself, what if the chemistry you feel isn't destiny, but an old wound pulling you back into the fire? What if what you've been calling love is really your nervous system begging for another chance to rewrite a childhood script? And what if the bravest thing you could do is not chase the person who keeps running, but finally stay with yourself instead? If this is landing for you, subscribe. We're just getting started. Here's the next truth you need to face. Super empaths fail with avoidance because they confuse healing power with responsibility. They believe their gift for seeing into someone's pain means they must also be the one to fix it. And that is the hook an avoidant will never consciously reject, but will always quietly resent. Picture this. You're sitting across from the person you love. You can feel the fear behind their silence, the wound behind their walls. You know exactly why they pull back, and your instinct is to lean in with compassion. You say, I understand, I'll be patient, I'll love you through this. And for a moment, it feels noble, divine even. You're not just their partner, you're their healer, their anchor, their safe harbor. But what you don't see is that in that very moment, you've taken ownership of something that was never yours to carry. Avoidants are not children, though they often behave like wounded ones. They are adults with choices, agency, and the same responsibility to heal themselves that you carry for yourself. Yet super empaths, because of their deep well of compassion, often step over that line. You start doing their emotional labor for them, interpreting their silences, rationalizing their disappearances, carrying the weight of both your wounds and theirs. And slowly and visibly, the relationship tilts into imbalance. Now, here's the twist. The avoidant doesn't thank you for this labor. They don't feel safer. They don't feel safer. They feel smothered. To them, your willingness to fix them feels like surveillance. It highlights their inadequacy. It confirms the shame they've been running from their entire lives, that they are broken, incapable, unworthy of being met as an equal. And so the more you heal, the more they resist. The more you soothe, the more they rebel, until you're left wondering how loving someone could create so much distance. Super empaths fail because they believe love means rescue. But rescue is not intimacy. Rescue is power imbalance. Rescue turns a lover into a parent, and an avoidant will always fight against that dynamic, even if unconsciously. They don't want to be healed by you. They want to escape the feeling that they need healing at all. So the shift is this. Your empathy is not a license to carry someone else's transformation. You can see their wounds without making them yours. You can witness their fear without trying to dissolve it. And the real test of your power is not how much of their weight you can hold. It's whether you're willing to set it down and say, this is not mine. Because here's the truth. You may not want to hear. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do for an avoidant is to stop healing them, to let them sit with their walls until they decide whether to climb out. And in that space, you finally see your role clearly, not savior, not fixer, not crutch. Just a human being who deserves reciprocity. Send this to someone who's been stuck in this dynamic for far too long. The fourth truth is one of the hardest to accept. Avoidants secretly resent the very qualities they're most drawn to in super empaths. At first, your warmth, your availability, your depth, it's magnetic to them. To someone who has spent their life retreating behind walls, your ability to love so openly feels intoxicating. It's like standing in the sun after years of shadow. They are captivated by your presence, the way you lean in instead of away, the way you can hold space for emotions they've never dared to name. But here's the paradox. The very light that draws them also exposes them. Your emotional openness highlights their avoidance. Your capacity for intimacy magnifies their fear of it. Your willingness to connect reminds them of how much they've been running. And while part of them longs for it, another part can't stand it. So what happens? They start to resent you. Not because you've done something wrong, but because your love threatens the fragile equilibrium they've built to survive. To them, your steadiness feels like pressure. Your generosity feels like exposure. Your consistency feels like a demand they can't meet. And rather than leaning into the gift you bring, they pull away, convincing themselves that you're too much, when in reality, it's their own capacity that feels too little. And here's where super empaths get trapped. You take their resentment personally. You think, maybe I am too intense. Maybe I should shrink myself. Maybe if I dial it down, they'll stay. So you begin to dim your light, to water down your love, to stretch into the version of yourself you think they can handle. But even then, it doesn't work, because their resentment was never about your intensity. It was about their incapacity. Super empaths fail with avoidance because they internalize this rejection as a verdict on their worth. But it's not about worth, it's about mismatch. The avoidant is at war with themselves, torn between craving intimacy and fearing it. And when you bring intimacy to the table, they project that war onto you. It's not you're too much. It's I can't hold what you're offering. This is why so many super empaths end up questioning their value, when the truth is their value is the very reason the avoidant was drawn to them in the first place. Your depth, your empathy, your courage to love without armor, those qualities are gold. But to someone who hasn't learned how to receive them, gold feels heavy. It feels like a burden they never asked to carry. So the shift is this. Stop shrinking to fit someone else's fear. Stop confusing their resentment with evidence that you're unlovable. Their rejection is not proof that you're too much. It's proof that they're not ready. And what if the real power move isn't to try to become digestible for someone who can't swallow love, but to keep offering yourself fully, unapologetically, to those who can, because the ones who are capable won't resent your depth. They'll rise to meet it. Share this with the empath in your life who needs to hear it today. The fifth truth is this. Super empaths fail with avoidance because they mistake intensity for safety. They confuse the roller coaster for real love. Let's be honest. When you're with an avoidant, it's never calm. There are highs so euphoric, they feel like destiny, and lows so painful, they feel like death. You get addicted to the chase, the crumbs, the rare moments when they finally let you in. It feels electric, intoxicating, unforgettable. But here's the lie your nervous system feeds you, that this intensity equals intimacy. Why does it feel so powerful? Because every time they withdraw, your body goes into panic. You're flooded with cortisol, adrenaline, a deep ache of abandonment. And when they finally return, even with the smallest gesture, that chemical storm flips. Dopamine floods your system. You feel relief, connection, ecstasy. And that cycle, panic, reward, mimics addiction. It hooks you deeper each time. So you start to believe if it feels this strong, it must be love. If I can't stop thinking about them, if I can't sleep, if I'm obsessed, this must mean it's real. But intensity isn't love. It's survival wiring. It's your nervous system lighting up because something old and familiar has been triggered. Love, real love, doesn't feel like desperation. It feels like exhale. It feels like ground beneath your feet, not quicksand. And yet, super empaths stay. Not because they don't know the pain, but because they've come to equate the pain with passion. They think safety is boring, that calm is flat, that consistency means a lack of spark. But here's the revelation. Safety is not the absence of passion. It's the foundation of it. Without safety, passion is just chaos. With safety, passion deepens instead of combusts. Avoidants, by nature, keep you in a cycle of uncertainty. And the longer you're in it, the more your nervous system learns to crave that very instability. You become bonded not to the person, but to the roller coaster itself. And that's why walking away feels impossible. It's not just about missing them, it's about detoxing from the chemical rush they create in you. Super empaths fail with avoidance because they keep mistaking that chemical chaos for destiny. But here's the truth. You need to anchor into love is not meant to feel like constant anxiety. If your heart races every time they text, not out of joy, but out of fear. Fear they'll disappear, fear they'll shut down, fear you'll lose them. You are not in love. You are in survival. The shift is to retrain your body to recognize calm as connection, to choose the partner who makes your system sigh in relief, not spiral in panic, to remember that safety is not dull, it's what allows love to grow without fear choking it. So I ask you, what if the real soulmate isn't the one who sets your nervous system on fire, but the one who helps it finally rest? Send this to the friend who keeps going back to the same storm, thinking it's love. The sixth and deepest truth is this. Super empaths only break the cycle with avoidance when they finally turn their empathy inward. Think about it. You've spent your whole life using your empathy as a bridge. You extend it outward like a lifeline, feeling everyone's pain, carrying everyone's weight, softening your edges to make others feel safe. You've become fluent in other people's emotions while remaining a stranger to your own. And it's this very gift, the thing that makes you extraordinary, that becomes your undoing in relationships with avoidance. Because here's the pattern. Every time the avoidant pulls away, you double down. You dig deeper into patience, into compassion, into understanding. You say, I know why they're afraid. I know they're hurting. If I can just love them a little more, they'll heal. But do you notice what's missing in that moment? You, your pain, your needs, your longing to be met, your right to be chosen. You vanish. Super empaths fail with avoidance, not because they don't love enough, but because they refuse to love themselves first. They abandon themselves in the name of loyalty. They betray their own hearts while defending someone else's wounds. They fight for the relationship at the cost of the one relationship that will decide everything, the one they have with themselves. Here's the radical shift. Empathy is not just something you give away, it's something you must turn inward. And until you do, you will keep seeking in avoidance the very care you deny yourself. What does inward empathy look like? It looks like sitting with your own loneliness instead of rushing to heal someone else's. It looks like asking, what do I need right now, before asking, what do they need? It looks like honoring your boundaries as sacred, even when your heart aches to bend them. It looks like saying, I deserve love that comes toward me, not away from me. And here's the miracle when you begin to practice empathy for yourself. The attraction to avoidance starts to fade. What once felt magnetic begins to feel exhausting. What once felt like chemistry begins to feel like chaos. You stop confusing the adrenaline of uncertainty with the peace of connection, and you start to see clearly, love that requires me to abandon myself is not love. Super empaths only fail until they stop failing themselves. Because when you finally embody empathy for your own heart, you no longer settle for relationships where you are half loved, half seen, half chosen. You stop auditioning for love and start requiring it. And avoidants, the ones who thrived on your endless giving, suddenly lose their hold. And maybe this is the hardest truth of all. The healing was never about getting them to stay. It was about getting you to come back to yourself. So I'll leave you with this question. What if the love you've been chasing in them has been waiting inside you all along? And what if the moment you choose yourself is the moment you finally open the door to the kind of love that doesn't run, doesn't hide, doesn't flinch, but meets you fully, fearlessly as you are? If this spoke to your soul, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe, and let's rewrite the story of love together.